special edition of Valley Sports Telegram's recap. This one's actually going to be a recap and preview looking ahead. And so we're going to jump right on into it. As always, joining me is Kenny Hodges and Kaylie Harden. And let's roll. It was what we consider a light slate because of all the bye weeks. And there weren't too many games that we were super hyper focused on, but there were some results. So starting with Birmingham going on the road into Texas, facing Steel, and 49-7. That game was never about the result. It was about the experience. It was about playing a tough opponent and getting ready for league. And let's see how that works out. And we'll get into that in about a few minutes. Next, that was the only West Valley game. Everybody else was on bye. In the East Valley, Paulie woke all of us up here at VST with a 35-3 thrashing of Verdugo Hills. This game was close, and then in the fourth quarter, the Parrots blew the doors off and ran away. And the last East Valley game from last week was Grant and Monroe, and that young Grant team put up a number, showing that when they put it together, they can actually do some things. And for Coach Cecily, that has to be a very good sign. It was a 48-21 victory for the Lancers. And in the Valley Mission, Reseda went into Silmar, and in the words of Coach Ward, they hung tough and ran out of gas. It was a 54-22 final. Silmar ran away in the end. And we know Reseda does have their numbers are starting to get there. So they're building, we'll see. And this is a good statement for Silmar, putting up a big number against the team they should have beaten. And then moving into Panorama, they went into Van Nuys, and it was a thumping. It was 42-19. Panorama rolling on just as we expect them, and Coach Beltran has got to be happy with a couple big matchups looming. Before we get into the game of the week, which was a Valley Mission contest, we were looking at a few Southern Section games that were happening close by. Crescenta Valley, the CV Falcons were the visiting team at the field they share with Hoover, the Tornadoes. And they had, and I'll go into it really quickly in a bit, but it was a 35-7 final there. And back to our game of the week, Kennedy at San Fernando. And I think both coaches have a little issue with how their teams played. And they're also probably happy with some of what they did on the defensive end. It was a 17-14 final in favor of Kennedy. Kennedy keeps control of the Valley Mission. Kenny, what are your thoughts on the games from this past week?
Well, starting obviously in the West Valley, the only action we had, everyone else was on the bye, was that Birmingham game. They took a trip to Texas. Yeah, it didn't go their way. They lost 49-7, but they got some good. If you follow their Instagram, they got some good barbecue. They got to go watch Texas State play. It was a great bonding experience. It was a great experience for these kids here in the Valley to get to go out and experience big time football in Texas, and get to feel like one of those. Get to feel like the teams often get to do in the Southern Section. Now we'll see how it affects their legs this week, because they've got a tough one coming up this week in their West Valley opener. But nevertheless, it was a great experience for those kids. Now, shooting back over to the East Valley, congratulations to Coach Cecily putting his first win on the board this year. 48 points is nothing to sneeze at. They do have young players in that program that they're trying to get that thing built. They're trying to get that thing built up, back up to win and maybe be contenders in the East Valley next season with some of this young talent that gets to develop with their quarterback. And we know what the situation is for Monroe. Coach Pops, he's got a job on his hands. They graduated a lot last year. It's going to be a bit of a rebuild, but no doubt Monroe will be back. Verdugo and Poly, listen, at this point, our antennas were starting to raise a bit on what Poly was doing. I've seen them. I've watched them play a couple of times. I've seen the film on them. I didn't know if I was a believer, but now it's time to start buying stock into this program and what they may be able to do in terms of making some noise in this East Valley League and what they may be able to do come postseason time. They've got some veterans. They've got some kids who've come into the program who've contributed right away in their first year there. And that wasn't a fluke. That was a tough game going into the fourth quarter, but then the experience and the quality of Poly sort of shown at the end, and they kind of put that game away with a big fourth quarter, 28 points in the final quarter to kind of blow that game open. Noho and Chavez, I've been telling you guys for a year, spending the time around that Chavez program. They've been building. It was just a matter of time before those young kids started to mature and kind of go from potential grit and potential to actually being able to show that they can beat some of the better teams. NoHo is the team we pegged as a front runner in the East Valley, and for Chavez to hang in that game, despite the fact that Jalen Burke had 200 plus on the ground, and hang tough and then put the game away at the end and get a 34-33 win, I think speaks volumes about where that program is going, and it speaks volumes about what they might be able to do this season. Now, shooting over to the Valley Mission, Silmar doing what you're supposed to do against Reseda, like we talked about with Coach Ward. He's getting that thing going the right way. It's just going to take him a little bit of time. So Silmar did what they were supposed to do there. Panorama, the team looks awesome. We're 3 years into this particular group with Coach Beltran of really sort of building a real consistent, competitive team that does not beat themselves. And when they get a chance to put a number on you, they do. And I know they've had their eyes on what was happening with Kennedy and San Fernando. I'm going to go more in depth on that one, with Kennedy coming away with a tough victory. But there was a lot of interesting things to take from that game. Shooting over to the southern section, there's a few things that I think are worth mentioning just with some of the teams in and around the area. Viewpoint beat Carpinteria at home. That's back-to-back wins for the Patriots. They moved to 3-2, and that's some positive. That program is starting to move in a positive direction. Shout out to Alamany, beating Lawndale 34-27 at home, picking up their first win of the season. They've got a tough one against Amat next week, and as they open up league play. Sierra Canyon put a big number on Cigarro, the team from Arizona that came out. They beat them 63-6. I think what's more important to kind of talk about, as opposed to talking about the game, is just how crazy this Trailblazers defense has been. 6.6 points per game this entire season. They've had 11 takeaways in the last 4 games. That defensive unit hunts. Good luck to Notre Dame next week. You're going to have a job to do. You have your work cut out for you trying to put up anything on that Trailblazer defense. Alonzo Contreras went balled out for Calabasas as they picked up another win. Good to see that program moving in the right direction as they get ready to head into their Marmont slate. CV, their third win in a row for the Falcons. Great to see them they're starting to kind of build that thing and build momentum as we get into the league play for them. They've got a tough one with Maria coming up next week. And congratulations to St. Genevieve. It's been a tough beginning to the season for the Valiants. They had some kids kind of exit the program, whether it was graduation or going other places. That coaching staff has been locked in, trying to get these kids prepared, and they got their first win of the season, 19-13 over Campbell Hall. That built some positive momentum for them going forward in the season. So good, congratulations to them picking up their first win. And those are my news and notes around the Valley.
Before I kick it to you to really go in depth on what you saw out of Kennedy and San Fernando, I want to take a moment to talk about a player that I saw at the Crescenta Valley Hoover game. This kid was dynamic. He was all over the field. And he was essentially the difference maker. His name is Xavier Thompson. He is a wide receiver. He's a defensive back. Oh, and he's the place kicker for the Falcons. So he does a little bit of everything for CV, and he led them last Friday night in their win. Now, it's no hyperbole that he did everything. He opened the scoring on a 6-yard rush, and then he caught a 7-yard touchdown pass that was really nice. He was running an inside slant, and Hunter Deno's pass was a little low. He reached down and caught it, and he slid into the end zone. It was a really, really nice way to play the ball away from the defender and get across the goal line to score. And then he had a interception late in the first half that really kind of kicked things into motion. Shortly after the interception, the defense for Hoover thought they had a play, ended up being a safety against Hoover. It was a bit of a mental block. DB intercepted the ball in the end zone, stepped out, and ended up back in the end zone. Safety. After that is when things got nice. They got deep into the half, and ball was at the 48-yard line, and Deno threw a beautiful ball down the sideline. Thompson was streaking. Caught it. Boom. That was his third touchdown of the game. And then he scored in the third quarter to really put the game on ice and trigger the running clock. It was a 20-yard rush around the edge right to the pylon. This kid is a game breaker. He's a playmaker. He really kind of makes that CV offense dynamic. He really gives Deno more weapons, because in previous years they didn't have too many guys. Essentially, their offense was Bjorn Hermansen at the wide receiver, and this kid is a beast. And Giovanni Vartagnan. Those were kind of the guys as far as wide receivers. They had some, they've had running backs, but now you throw in Thompson, and he can make some noise when they get in a league play, which they are starting this week. And on that, I'm going to kick it to you, Kenny. You had the game of the week from a distance, and you had actually a really good view of what was going on. So what do you got?
Yeah. So, for full disclosure, we had a reporter who was there covering the game, but for me, I ingest as much of this stuff as I can. So I had the ability to be able to kind of peek in and watch the Kennedy San Fernando game. So I could kind of give you my perspective of what I saw for those two teams, because it was a huge game. What we've seen sort of develop in the Valley Mission is Kennedy, San Fernando, and Panorama have kind of sort of separated themselves as sort of the three teams that are really vying for that league title. Sylmar might be just maybe a step behind them. Maybe could be a player in winning that league if things were to fall right for them. But it's really those three teams of the gauntlet that are going to beat each other up to see who wins the Valley Mission League and sort of carries momentum into the postseason. So of those, those three games, this was the three games that are going to feature those three teams that are going to sort of decide the league. This game was sort of round one in that gauntlet, with Kennedy and San Fernando facing off against each other at San Fernando High School. The big theme that came out of this game was the missed opportunities. It was a close game. It was a tight game that could have gone either way. But they were just missed opportunities really by both teams, but more importantly for San Fernando, seeing as how they came up on the short end of the scoreboard of a 17-14 game. And there were just times where if they would have maybe not committed such a mental error here or there, maybe been able to hold their water a little bit better, finish off 1 or 2 drives, they might have won this game by a score or more. Specifically, San Fernando had 2 drives in the first half. One at the end of the first quarter, going into the second quarter, and then one later on in the second quarter where they were deep into Kennedy's territory. And if they would have been able to kind of finish the drive, punch the drive off, they would have been able to put points on the board, obviously. But it was the way that the drives kind of got stymied that sort of kind of felt like this was a team that this was their first time sort of in a big spot this way, where there was pressure on the moment, and they just sort of kind of just faltered. Getting inside of Kennedy's 20-yard line, moving the ball, driving the ball down the field, and then getting procedure penalties or false starts or illegal shifts, and then putting yourselves behind the chains. That's a tough thing to deal with a Kennedy defense they're very sound. You might be able to move the ball on them, but once you get inside the red zone, that's when they tend to stiffen up and they make life very difficult and miserable for you. And that's what they did in this game. San Fernando had opportunities where they drove deep, a couple of penalties, set them back. Now all of a sudden the 1st and 10 inside the 20 turns into a 1st and 15 or a 1st and 20 outside of the 30, and the drives just kind of came to a halt, and they ended up not being able to kind of put points on the board. They ended up going into the half down 10-0. So on that point, the penalties, just drive killers, both teams in this game. And I know it had a lot to do with the fact that it's a very antsy moment. You know how big the enormity of the moment in this game. It just felt like both teams at times just didn't have the ability to just kind of stay in the moment, and the mental errors and the mental mistakes just kind of killed both teams. Bad penalties and drives, putting the teams behind the chains, and it sort of became a game of who would be able to kind of overcome those mistakes, who would be able to kind of make a play when now you're dealing with 1st and 15 or second and 12 to sort of be able to kind of put a drive together. And honestly, what happened in that game was it was Kennedy who was able to kind of do that and kind of sustain drives, put points on the board, and that ended up kind of being the separator of the game. And then moving into my third point in terms of the separator of the game, have to talk about Diego Montes and what he's doing at the quarterback position this year for Kennedy. A young player, a sophomore, who's sort of taking the reins of this offense. And every week, every time you watch this kid, he's getting better and better and better and more comfortable. As Coach Prime would say, don't let me get comfortable. This young man is starting to get comfortable at that position. Then you're starting to see the fruits of that labor and the fruits of what they put into him there start to pay out on the field. More importantly, when you look at how Kennedy's offense is sort of transformed from being run first, run heavy, to being able to spread you out and throw the ball all over the place, you also got to look at the weapons he's throwing to. Bentley Castro, Giovanni Nelson, Joshua Madrigan, Javon Carter, Steven Garcia, Justin Sears. That wide receiver room for Kennedy is stacked now. And only 2 of those kids are seniors, so a lot of them are coming back. So they'll be able to continue to build on what they're doing with their young quarterback. And you're starting to see it come to fruition, because there were times in the game in which San Fernando, to their credit, that defense was flying around. They were getting pressure. They were getting him off his mark. And this young man would show you how smooth he was. He'd get outside of the pocket. He throws an accurate ball on the run. He's got a rocket of an arm. He can get the ball down the field. And he would just back-breaking completions where they have their 3rd and longs, and he'd extend the play outside of the pocket, and he'd find Bentley Castro or Giovanni Nelson up the sideline to extend the play, get beyond the chains and kind of keep drives going, including the play that ended up being the game winner, where he was flushed outside of the pocket, put up a beautiful deep ball, and Joshua Madrigal came down with the ball. It ended up being the touchdown that ended up being the game decider. So Kennedy's offense is still not even at its full potential yet with all these young pieces they have on there. And that part is scary. Now, I will say, with having a young quarterback, he, as dynamic as he might be, there's still a lot of room for improvement because he still makes a lot of mistakes. Quite frankly, he kept San Fernando in the game with some of those mistakes. For example, they're up 10-0 at the half. San Fernando coughs the ball up to begin the second half. Kennedy's got the ball deep in San Fernando territory. Looked like they're getting ready to put the game away, quite frankly, because at that point, it didn't feel like San Fernando could put points on the board. And he throws a pick six where you couldn't tell if he was blushed and wanted to throw the ball away or he was trying to hit his guy in the corner, but he ended up throwing it right to Isaiah Castro, the San Fernando corner, who takes it back 85 yards for a touchdown. And now a game that looked like it was about to be 13-0 minimum, maybe 17-0, and there might be a cakewalk. All of a sudden now it's 10-6. The 2-point conversion is 10-8, and it's a brand new ball game on a play where he probably should have just got rid of the ball. He had another mistake later in that half where he was scrambling. He was holding the football like a loaf of bread. It gets knocked out of his hand. Now you give San Fernando the ball back and give them another opportunity to try to come back and win the game. So there's some things that the young man's got to clean up. And I also want to give a shout out to San Fernando, despite the fact coming up short in this particular game, they still got that game against Panorama coming up down the line. I feel like I saw enough out of this team that they're going to be able to give Panorama everything they want, but they're going to have to commit to the run game. The one thing that they didn't do in the game that I think would have helped their cause was to commit to running the football. The one drive in the game where they committed to running the football, their young sophomore running back, he ran it straight down Kennedy's throat. And it just sort of made you feel like if they committed to doing that more, it might have sort of kind of helped their quarterback and the pressure that he was dealing with in his face all day. And it might have actually shortened the game and given them a better opportunity to kind of stifle Kennedy and maybe steal a game at home. So good win for Kennedy. They strike the first blow in this battle for the Valley mission. I'm sure Panorama had their eye on this game closely since they're going to have to deal with both of those teams. But San Fernando's not out of it. They're still going to have an opportunity depending on what happens when Kennedy plays Panorama and what they do when they face Panorama themselves.
It's going to be an exciting last couple weeks for those teams wrapping up the season. But that's a couple weeks away. Where we stand right now, there are some exciting matchups in this coming week. And I'm going to run off the list of them, and then I'm going to talk for a minute, and we'll let Kenny and Kaylie give their thoughts on some of these upcoming matchups. I'm going to start first with Southern Section. Sierra Canyon is hosting Notre Dame. This is kind of the big game there. It kicks off their league. The thought is Sierra Canyon's stifling defense should do some damage to Notre Dame, but this is also Notre Dame's chance to say that they can hang in a very, very difficult league. It's going to be an interesting battle for them on Friday night. Back in the city section, Pauley is going to Arleta, and this is where you try to establish dominance now. If Pauley beats Arleta, now you're upsetting the hierarchy of the standings in the East Valley. That's definitely one we're keeping an eye on. Also in the East Valley, Grant is visiting Verdugo Hills. How does Verdugo Hills rebound from that loss to Pauley, which is their third straight? And how does Grant come into this fresh off the heels of a big win, a confidence-boosting win? How is each team going to handle it in a big Friday night game? San Fernando's looking to rebound, going into Van Nuys, and Van Nuys is no pushover. They've played some tough games. They've done, shown that if you're not ready for them, they can surprise you. So that's going to be an interesting look. Is San Fernando going to be able to kind of take care of business and do what they should do against a Van Nuys team that is kind of up and coming, but it's not quite there yet? And then in the West Valley, we've got some big matchups. It's homecoming for El Camino. They'll be playing at Birmingham High School, hosting Chatsworth. So their designated home team at Birmingham playing Chatsworth. It is homecoming for El Camino, so that'll be kind of a big deal there. And the one where the trash talk began super early. Cleveland is visiting Taft. Kenny's got some thoughts on this one. I can't wait for him to riff on that. This is going to be a big test for both teams. How is Taft rebounding after being shorthanded prior to the bye? Getting beat up pretty bad by Heritage Christian. Cleveland comes in at 4-1. They very well could be 5-0, if not for dropping a game against Hamilton. And the winner of that is going to be telling the rest of that West Valley League that they're going to be making noise. And finally, our VST game of the week. Birmingham is at Granada Hills. Granada's fresh off a bye. Birmingham was in Texas. We saw how this played out the last year, and the rosters were similar. I mean, yes, Granada does not have Dijon, but Birmingham graduated some players as well. So they both brought back a lot. Their cores are looking strong. They both seem to have maybe figured out what they're trying to do. This is going to be a huge, huge, huge tilt. And Kaylie told me that she cannot wait to talk about this. So I'm going to let her just jump in on the game of the week right away and let her riff. Kaylie.
Yeah, so there's a couple interesting things to consider when you are thinking of the Birmingham Granada matchup. Obviously, Birmingham is going to be the favorite in this case because they're in the open division, and Granada was the D1 champ last year in the city section. So by that standard, it would seem like it's not really that much of a toss-up, but you have to think that, Granada just showed us that they have the skills. They just unlocked a new Infinity Stone or whatever the hell you want to call it. I'm not a Marvel fan, but their last game, they were able to seal the game away with a touchdown pass, which we've never seen out of them in years. So if they had those last 2 weeks to really tune in that skill set, and meanwhile, Birmingham is getting their butts kicked out in Texas, that's a big difference in how these two teams have been able to prepare for this game and what their mindsets are going to be going into it. So a game that might have been a little even or just slightly in favor of Birmingham now becomes way more of an interesting matchup. On top of that, like Arshavir mentioned, there are some players that are graduated from both rosters as of this year. And it'll be interesting to see because both teams, I think early in the season, were still trying to piece together how they were going to fit their younger players into their strategy to win. And both coaching staffs they do an incredible job, and they know their players well. So I have no doubt that they've kind of gotten it together by this point in the season. I mean, we're like halfway there. So yeah, needless to say, I'm excited. I think that if Granada can up the way Granada can diversify the way that they're running the ball and maybe even pass the ball a little bit more against this Birmingham defense, which we've seen in previous games this season has lacked a couple times. If Birmingham makes the right mistakes and if Granada comes in with the right amount of preparation that they should have gotten in the last 2 weeks, Granada has a fair chance to try to steal this game.
Yeah, to me, this game is all about Granada's defense to me. We know what Granada's going to do on offense. We see that as the season has kind of gone along, Darrell has sort of accepted that role that he's the head honcho now. It runs through him, and we know we're fine on that point. The key to beating Birmingham, if you're going to knock them off as sort of the kings of this league, the kings of the city, is you're going to have to beat that team up, because we know what Coach Rose is building over there. They're the bullies. Somebody's got to bully the bully. And to me, looking at that Granada front, it's all about them in this game. Tisdale will throw you. I love the kid. He's a great quarterback, but he's a human like any other quarterback. If you can get in his face, he might throw you one. So that's going to be the key to them. John Williamson kind of getting that push up the middle, kind of forcing Tisdale to try to get outside, and then running into Taylor and Hexamer on the outside. What Darrell and Farrell are doing on the outside, trying to lock up Peyton Waters and those other weapons. Another key to this game too is going to see how Drayden Fowles, the kid who came from Elko, who has gotten in the last couple of games, if his role continues to change in Birmingham's offense, because he also gives them a different piece that they can kind of utilize as a kind of a change of pace guy that lines up at different places on the field for them to kind of take some of the pressure off of Peyton Waters as being the only playmaker they have. So these are things that Granada, but also these are things that Granada has been thinking about for 2 weeks as they've been preparing for this game, while Birmingham was off in gallivanting in Texas. So it's just intriguing. I think that while vulnerable might not seem to be the right word, and I know Coach Rose wouldn't use that word, he'd have some choice words for me for using the word vulnerable, but this is as gettable as this team has looked in a couple of years. I think this is the moment for Granada. They were right there. They were a false start, 1 point away from knocking this team off last year. And I know if you talk to those Granada coaches, that game still, despite everything they went on to accomplish, that's still a sore spot, because that's the one they wanted on top of everything else that they did last year. So those kids are going to be ready, and it's going to be interesting to see when they lock up on Friday night. It's going to be a good one.
Not to mention that they're also playing at Granada, because Birmingham's field is getting taken up by Elko.
Mm-hmm. So we know how Granada turns out for their games as it is. So that's going to be a raucous environment. Oh man, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I wish this is one of those games in which I could, like multiplicities, just split myself into different places so I could put a doppelganger in every place so I can watch every game at the same time, because this is definitely one, if you can go, you'd want to go to.
I'm having the same issue just deciding what sideline to stand on, because I know that no matter which one I choose, I'm going to get heat from the other team's coach. So
yeah, this might be a game where you might have to hang out under a goalpost. I don't know, to try to keep the heat off.
Well, I mean, if you guys would buy me that jetpack I've been asking for, I could be the drone shot from above the field.
Yeah,
maybe in the future. But I will say this on the location. This is the return match, because last year was at Birmingham, so they do alternate. This is going to be at Granada anyways, and Granada has been chomping at the bit, knowing that they're going to host this one, and they're going to have Birmingham coming into their house all year. They knew that was the deal, and just I can picture how rocking it's going to be. My only thing is that Granada's on the wrong side of the field.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird. It's weird to have them on that side.
It's actually a snack shack issue because of where it is built and the official, like real big, actual building is on the opposite side of the field, and so that's where they have the home fans, so they can have the better options of in-game treats. But that's neither here nor there when you're talking about on the field. And on the field, this is going to be a slugfest. It could be low scoring like it was last year. It could be a shootout like both of these teams have been in. It's going to be exciting to see. Now, following the unconventional preview of the game of the week first, I'm going to kick it to Kenny because that Cleveland-Taft matchup got spicy on Saturday morning.
Yeah, man.
Was playing. Oh, sorry.
No.
I'm I know you want to jump in, but neither team played last week. And I woke up this Saturday morning seeing spice in my feed. And I was like, these teams are already trading jabs. And here we go.
Yeah, like listen, man, and this is what you want, right? When you're talking about league matchups, when you're talking about rivalries, when you're talking about marking territory, that's what football is all about. Like this is my land. This is where I plan on taking up real estate, and I'm not just going to let somebody roll in here and think that they're going to come take over what we already been building on. Clearly, that's where we are with this matchup right out of the gate in the West Valley, because you've got one program that feels they're on the cusp. We've been talking about Cleveland. We talked about them at nauseum last year with having players like Donovan Powell, with a player like Corey Hall, an all-world player like Corey Hall. We know what Cleveland is. They want to be in that conversation the same way we just talked about Birmingham and Granada and being open teams and they want to. This is Coach Gunny is trying to build this program to be in that conversation. And if you're going to do that, you got to handle business in the West Valley with all the other teams who think that they are going to be moving to that conversation with you. We know I've written the pieces on Taft and what Coach Emerson is trying to do and trying to establish right out of the gate in year one. He believes he has a roster that's ready to compete with the better teams in the West Valley. He believes that he has the roster and the players. We've seen these guys put up statistics already this year that would tell you that they are not a team to be messed with. This is not the Taft of last year. This is a different offense. These are different players. They're ready to come out of the gates firing. And Cleveland is seeing that and saying, hold on, y'all haven't won anything yet. Y'all haven't done anything yet. Y'all haven't been in this conversation with the teams in the top of the West Valley. And in order for you to do so, you got to come through us. As we saw some of their players getting spicy, saying that Taft is garbage, doing all of this stuff. And I'm like, man, that's what you want to see. That's what I want to see. Let's get out here and let's mark our territory, because like I said, at the end of the day, both of these teams still got to deal with Birmingham and Granada at the end of the day. But if you even want that game to mean something, that means this first game out against each other, somebody's got to come out here and get this dub. And both of these teams are clearly primed and ready. They're going to have 2 weeks to prepare for it. It's going to be a dogfight. I know conventional wisdom would tell you, look at what Cleveland is doing, what they have done, and they should win this game. But there's something about what this Taft program is building, and they have a belief in that building that T-House is back and they're ready to compete with not just Cleveland, but with Granada, with Birmingham. And this is going to be a week they get to show and prove. They had a tough non-conference. Yeah, that 2-3 record might not look as sparkling, but like I said, we know what happened with Heritage. They had a bunch of guys missing. We know going up against the southern section teams like Westlake and that loss they had to Diamond League, when Diamond League is also an open division team, that they've sort of kind of taken their lumps early. They're ready to compete, and this game should be really fun in Woodland Hills this weekend.
We know how great Birmingham was last year, and they started their season off terrible because they do the same thing. So maybe they're just buying into the same strategy.
Yep. Oh no, for sure, because iron has to sharpen iron. Like, if you play in cupcakes, yeah, your record will look great, but it's not going to prepare you for Cleveland, Birmingham, and Granada at the top of that league. You got to play tough teams to get ready to play what you know is a gauntlet in your league. And they feel like they're ready to go. They feel like they're ready to compete, and they want to. I know for a fact, talking to that staff, they have come into this season saying, we are going to shock people. And this was a game that they circled on the calendar and said, this is a game in which people will be talking about us after this game. Now it's time for them to just show and prove.
Now, I do have to say there's another team to not fully sleep on. And that's where I'm going to be on Friday night. Those Road Warriors over at El Camino. And they're in a bit of a transition year. They got a really young quarterback, but they're still anchored by a beast. And this team, if they catch you on an off day, they're going to beat you. Simple as that. Because they're still very well coached. They can be very disciplined, and they're on the field still has that ability. This team will definitely be showing growth as long as they're able to keep everybody in house. Just got to figure out how to replace Big Jake Shirley next year. But for this year, he's there, and he's putting this team on his back and pretty much saying, give me the ball and let's rumble down the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the question in this game, the unfortunate question to be asked is, talking to Coach Street, it seemed like they were going to handle the remote injury with some kid gloves for the first couple of weeks since it happened, since he got hurt in the Fillmore game. I don't know if I'd expect him to play or see the field. I know they're going to have to tie him to a bench in the locker room to try to keep him from being on the field, because that's the kind of kid he is and how he wants to help his team, especially starting out league play. But if they don't have him, are the other kids for Chatsworth going to be able to step up and sort of take on that workload against a team in Elko? Like we said, they still got some players there, but it's a winnable game. And for the teams that aren't named Granada and Birmingham in this league, when you aren't playing those two teams, you got to get those W's when you play the other teams. So this is a winnable game for both teams. It should be fun. It should be fiery. It should be competitive, like all West Valley matchups are. And it's going to be fun to see who is able to kind of notch that first win in the West Valley, because they're hard to come by in this league.
They are. And, on that note, I really got to say we're at that time of year where not just with the East Valley and the West Valley, but we're talking East Valley, we're talking Valley Mission. We're coming this way. You're talking Pacific Upper, you're talking the Mission League. All these leagues are now in their league play. Every week is big. Every game is important. And the stakes just keep getting higher and higher and higher. And we're here for all of it. And
yeah. There's a lot, because there's a lot of stories, man. There's a lot of stories. Like this Poly Arleta game. All of a sudden, this has league title implications because of how Poly has started off the season. So it kicks off at 3:30 on Friday, but that could, depending on how that game goes, we could be talking about the Parrots being a team that comes out of nowhere and takes the East Valley. That Notre Dame and Sierra Canyon game. Steel Pizzella is on a lot of teams' radars in terms of his college recruitment. He's going up against a Sierra Canyon defense that hasn't given anybody anything. Some of these places that have offered him are going to come really knocking on the door like, no, you need to come. Like, he's got an offer on the table from Georgia. So this is how people regard this kid. This is how you go from a 3-star to a 4-star. If you go into Sierra Canyon and put a number on the defense that hasn't given up anything, all of a sudden everybody will start talking about this kid, So there are just stories after story after story. Again, like you said, how is San Fernando going to rebound against Van Nuys? This is an opportunity for Van Nuys, as we talked off air, about where they're sitting on the bubble of being a D3 playoff team, San Fernando is one of the higher ranked teams here in the city section. You hang with them, now you go from being on the bubble to being in the D3 playoffs, right? So, man, there's so much as we get into league play. There's so many intriguing questions that are going to be answered over the next couple of weeks, and we can't wait to answer them for you.
Now, while we're doing that and we're covering, we want to see you out there. Because I'll tell you, you're looking at 3 butts that are going to be walking fields and hanging out and keeping our eyes on all this action, in addition to all of our reporters that we have spread out throughout the valley. We're keeping eyes on all of these games, and we want you to keep your eyes on these games, but we want you to do it with your butt in a seat at the stadium. Get out there, support these kids, get rowdy, get raucous in a fun way, be loud, cheer them on, because that's what these kids need. That's what they deserve. They deserve to feel that love from you, because that's what it's all about. We say this every week. We say this all the time. It's 100% about showing the love, and that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, man. Only thing I can add to that is thanks for supporting us. Leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification so you know when we talk about all this stuff that's going down in the valley, because this is our passion. This is what we love to do. So, like Arshavir said, we out here walking these sidelines. So we support our kids, and thank you for supporting us.
And with that, we will see you guys soon, next week.
Peace.
Can't wait to see you guys this weekend. No excuses.